They laughed when the vanguard entered the galactic fleet. It wasn't just slow, it was ancient. Clunky metal plates bolted together like someone had built it in a junkyard, then forgot to throw it away. No sleek curves, no quantum core, no warp fins. The alien commanders nicknamed it the Junkyard Whale. Some even placed bets that it wouldn't survive a single battle. Standing on its bridge was Captain Marcus Hale, a battle-hardened man with stormy eyes and a voice like gravel. His record was spotless, but he carried himself like someone who'd been burned too many times by command decisions. His crew? A chaotic mix of Earth's military outcasts, techs banned for unauthorized innovation, soldiers with disciplinary marks, and a combat pilot who still wore a leather jacket from the 20th century. The Vanguard was the Galactic Union's embarrassment, a slow, lumbering symbol of Earth's desperation to stay in the game. While the Valaks flew shimmering organic ships and the Elarathi rode vessels made of liquid crystal, Earth offered up this relic, fueled by a refurbished nuclear core and patched together with parts from freighters, mining rigs, and maybe a few washing machines. When the Urtek invasion hit, the Union barely acknowledged Earth's contribution. The Urtek weren't just hostile, they were abominations, machines spliced with meat, guided by a hive AI older than most known civilizations. They didn't invade, they consumed. Planets fell in hours, civilizations vanished in weeks. Still, the Union assigned the Vanguard to rear patrol, away from the real war, far from glory or danger, babysitting empty sectors while others died at the front. Hale didn't argue. He just looked at his XO, Lieutenant Rami, sharp as a scalpel, with a fuse as short as her temper, and said, "Let them laugh. We know what we've got." Because the Vanguard had secrets. She may have been slow, but she wasn't soft. Marcus Hale and his team had hollowed her out and rebuilt her with ancient brutality. Her armor was triple-layered titanium with reactive gel buffers. Her main guns were mass accelerators capable of cracking battle cruisers in half. No AI, no integrated neural systems. Everything analog. Dials, buttons, vacuum tubes. A walking relic, immune to digital corruption. The Urtek didn't see her coming because they couldn't. And buried deep in her belly, protected behind meters of lead and steel, was Earth's last hope. Project Cassandra. Not a weapon in the traditional sense. Something worse. Something that shouldn't exist, but did, because humans are good at building things they were never meant to control. The joke ended in blood when the first Union fleet got shredded in the Olin Belt. 500 ships, gone in 6 minutes. The Urtek didn't just destroy, they infected, hacked systems, turned fleets against themselves. But the Vanguard was dark to them, a ghost ship. No digital signature, no neural net, just silence and static. "New orders," Rami muttered, tossing a crumpled printout on Hale's console. "They're pulling everyone forward. We're officially on frontline support. I think they're desperate." Hale didn't blink. He stared at the empty stars and muttered, "Took them long enough." Then louder, "Warm the coils. Spin up Project Cassandra. Let's make sure they notice us this time." Below deck, an engineer turned an old key in a steel box. Lights dimmed across the ship. The hull groaned. Somewhere deep inside, something began to stir. The Vanguard might be slow, but she was never meant to run. She was made for one thing, to be the last nightmare anyone would ever see. The stars flickered around the Vanguard, but inside everything was silent except for the low hum of old engines waking up. Every screw and bolt in the hull felt like it was shaking off centuries of dust. Somewhere near engineering, a warning klaxon gave a tired cough, and then finally came to life, wailing out its groan like it hadn't screamed in decades. Marcus Hale stood on the bridge, staring at the big circular display showing the Union fleet. They were clustered just ahead near a dead moon, reorganizing after another Yurtek ambush. Half of them were limping. The rest looked more like scattered survivors than a battle-ready task force. "They're scared," Rami muttered beside him, her arms crossed, jaw tight. "Every ship in that group is running backups on backups. They're practically rebooting themselves in circles." "They should be scared," Hale replied. "But fear without direction is just chaos." Behind them, Commander Knox, an ex-Marine with a cybernetic spine and 2 missing fingers, stepped onto the bridge. "Cassandra's warming up. The containment ring is stable for now. But when we fire it up for real, we're on a timer. You know that, right?" Hale nodded. "I'm counting on it." He didn't explain further. He rarely did. He had a habit of keeping the full plan in his head until the last second. Rami hated that about him, but she'd served long enough to know that when Marcus Hale said, "Wait," you waited, because whatever he was about to do was going to be insane, and probably work. The Vanguard eased its way towards the edge of the fleet formation. The rest of the ships shifted aside like a herd avoiding a diseased animal. Some even powered down their external comms. No one wanted to be connected to this embarrassment when the next wave of Yurtek hit. On the main screen, flashes of light began to bloom. Faint at first, like fireflies dancing in a storm. But Hale knew what they were. Yurtek scouts, mechanical filth, spiders with plasma-laced legs, machines that whispered in radio static and left nothing behind but drifting corpses and signal noise. "Here they come," Knox said grimly, watching as several dots peeled off from the edge of space. They didn't move in formation. Yurtek never did. They swarmed like insects, too fast and too chaotic for most targeting systems to track. "Hold fire," Hale said. "Not yet." A younger officer, Ensign Keeler, barely 22, fresh from Earth, glanced up from his terminal. "Sir, they're approaching fast. Shouldn't we—" "No," Hale cut in. "Let them get closer." The bridge was quiet again. Keeler swallowed hard and returned to his console. His fingers trembled, but he didn't argue. The Yurtek scouts began zipping through the outer fleet, picking at smaller Union ships like piranhas. One corvette blinked out in a flash of red as its own AI turned against it, ramming the ship straight into a fuel frigate. The explosion was massive. The fleet started to scatter, trying to reposition. Still, Hale didn't move. "They're ignoring us," Rami whispered. "Because they don't see us," Hale replied, voice calm. "They're trying to infect systems, corrupt code, bend smart metal. The Vanguard is blind to them. It's like we're not even here." Then he turned to the comms officer. "Open up a channel, all frequencies." "Aye, sir." The officer hesitated for a moment before tapping into the broad spectrum comm array, an ancient analog unit bolted to the floor, humming like a wounded animal. No encryption, just raw, old-school broadcast. And Marcus Hale leaned into the mic. "To the Union fleet, you fought this war the wrong way. We gave the enemy everything it needed: networks, AI, digital vulnerability. It's not strength they use against us. It's our own systems." He paused. "This is Captain Marcus Hale of the warship Vanguard. We don't run software. We run steel, grit, and fire. Fall back. Let us handle this." A long silence answered. Then a Yurtek vessel, larger than the rest, a twisted hybrid of steel and wet tissue, peeled from the stars and came straight toward the Vanguard. It was hideous. A churning, screaming thing with a glowing brain-like mass pulsing in the center of its hull. It leaked black plasma as it flew, and its weapons glowed with that same sickly green energy the Union had learned to fear. But it didn't fire. It just scanned. Then it blinked like a glitch. Confused. There were no systems to hack, no firewall to corrupt, no neural map to invade, just raw metal. That's when Hale whispered, "Now." The technician in engineering threw the final lever. Cassandra came online. The Vanguard began to vibrate, not shake, not rattle, but vibrate like it was humming along with some song no one else could hear. Lights dimmed. The air thickened. The sound of the engines dropped into a deep, bone-rattling growl. Project Cassandra wasn't a gun. It was a gravitational imploder, an illegal, unsanctioned weapon pulled from a banned Earth experiment in dark energy. The Vanguard had been rebuilt around it, like a church built around a buried god. Energy began to pool at the nose of the ship. Not light, not plasma, just force, a ripple in space itself. And then Hale gave the command. "Fire!" The ship didn't make a sound. Not at first. The Cassandra device released its pulse, and reality bent. The space between the Vanguard and the approaching Urtek ship folded, then snapped, and the Urtek ship was gone. Not exploded, not vaporized, just erased. A hole remained, spinning, collapsing in on itself like a dying scream. The remaining Urtek scouts pulled back in disarray, their chaotic swarm disrupted by the disappearance of one of their own. Union ships stopped firing. Everything stopped. The Vanguard stood alone in space, surrounded by silence and the faint gravitational echo of its kill. "Jesus," Rami whispered. "We just deleted a cruiser." "Not deleted," Knox said quietly. "We disconnected it." Cassandra didn't kill with fire or lasers. It unraveled spatial anchoring. Anything hit by it ceased to exist within normal physics. Not even debris remained. Hale leaned back in his chair. His eyes didn't blink. "We built Cassandra to be the last word in any war, and we were afraid to use it. Until now." The comms lit up. Union commanders demanding answers, wanting specs, shouting questions. Hale ignored them. Instead, he turned back to the stars. More Urtek were coming. Hundreds, thousands. He could already see them swarming in the distance, reorganizing, rethinking their strategy. And now, they saw the Vanguard. Not as a ghost, not as a joke, but as a threat. "Prepare Cassandra for recharge," Hale said. 20-minute cooldown, Knox warned. "After that we can fire again, maybe twice before the core burns out." Hale gave a slow nod. "We won't need more than that." Then he did something strange. He smiled. "They wanted war," he said. "Now they've got one." The silence after Cassandra's first shot was almost painful. Out in the void, the Union fleet drifted like a stunned animal, unsure whether it had just witnessed a miracle or a violation of every natural law. On every ship, commanders stared in disbelief at their sensor logs. Even the Urtek paused, if such things could be said to pause. The usual chaos of their movements slowed, their swarm formation coiling like a nest of metallic serpents circling a threat they suddenly understood might bite back. Marcus Hale stood on the bridge, still and silent. "Status?" he asked. Lieutenant Rami was already scanning the boards. "Hull integrity stable. No breaches. Energy systems holding, but the Cassandra core's hot. Cooling is engaged, but it's pulling every ounce from the backup reserves." Knox stepped forward. "We'll be able to fire again, but not at full power. If we push it too soon, we might breach the core chamber. And if that happens, we won't be around to regret it," Hale finished flatly. The crew was tense but focused. There was no celebration, no cheering. They all understood what Cassandra represented. Not a victory, a warning, a line crossed that should never have been drawn in the first place. The tactical screen flickered. Dozens, no hundreds of Urtek vessels were accelerating toward them, breaking away from other battle groups like the rest of the war no longer mattered. The Vanguard had their full attention now. Keeler looked up from his console, pale-faced. "Sir, they're converging. A full cluster. Estimated 230 ships, and they're forming a wall. A containment pattern, Rami muttered. They want to surround us, isolate the threat. They think we're the virus now, Knox said, almost smiling. Hale's jaw clenched. Good. That means they're scared. He stepped closer to the display. The Vanguard was a single blip in the middle of a forming spiral of death. Most captains would have ordered a retreat, called for reinforcements, waited for a coordinated response from the Union. But Marcus Hale had never been most captains. Bring us into the mouth of their formation, he ordered. Direct path, full burn. Rami turned to him, blinking. You want to drive right into a 200-ship death swarm? Yes. Without Cassandra ready? Yes. There was a beat of silence. Then she turned back to her console without another word. She didn't agree, but she trusted him enough to obey. Keeler, Hale said, patch me into the fleet again. The ensign hesitated for only a second. You're live, sir. This is Captain Marcus Hale of the Vanguard. We're engaging the enemy swarm head-on. Don't try to stop us. Don't try to help. Stay back and protect your flanks. You're not built for this. He cut the channel before the inevitable shouting could come through. The ship began to lurch forward, its engines roaring like monsters from some ancient hell. The Vanguard wasn't fast, but it was unstoppable, like an avalanche or a funeral march, one that didn't care what lay in its path. Ahead, the Yurtek were moving with perfect inhuman coordination. Ships of every shape and size, crab-like destroyers, spider frigates, snake-bodied carriers, folding around each other, building layers of firepower and interception grids. They weren't taking any chances. Hale stood in the middle of the bridge, silent as the enemy formation swallowed their view. His eyes were distant, locked not on the immediate threat, but on memory. A memory of Earth, of the labs that created Cassandra, of the warning labels stamped in red, unstable, unpredictable, unacceptable, of his brother screaming through a sealed window as the first prototype imploded a test chamber and half a mountain. Cassandra was a weapon of grief, a weapon of shame. And now, it was humanity's best hope. 2 minutes to breach point, Rami called out. Her voice was steady, but everyone could feel the tension under it. The crew braced for impact. Then the first wave hit. Yurtek fighters swarmed in from all sides. Unlike Union vessels, the Vanguard couldn't rely on automated defense grids or smart drones. Everything was manual. Every turret fired under human control. Every kill was earned. The gunners came alive. Turrets roared. Coils screamed. The air inside the ship grew hotter with every second, every discharge of kinetic rounds slamming out into the void like angry thunder. The old guns of Earth, polished and tuned to perfection, struck with precision that even AI targeting systems would envy. Fighter after fighter exploded into clouds of metal and gore. But there were too many. The Vanguard took hits. The ship groaned under the weight of the assault. Sparks flew across the bridge as a conduit blew overhead. Emergency lights flickered on. "Incoming on port hull," shouted Knox. "Brace for impact!" A Yurtek kamikaze drone slammed into the side of the ship. The explosion rocked the decks. For a moment, Hale saw stars through a crack in the ceiling plating. "Seal that breach!" he barked. "Reroute power from secondary comms to structural shielding!" "Done!" Rami shouted, fingers dancing across her controls. Despite the hits, the Vanguard pushed forward. Then, finally, the Cassandra system pinged green. "Core stabilized," Knox said. "We're ready." Hale gave no verbal order. He simply raised a single hand, a gesture, and the trigger was pulled. This time the effect was different. Instead of targeting one ship, Cassandra's field was spread, a low-yield, wide-range pulse, a ripple that warped gravity in a cone ahead of them. Not powerful enough to erase, but strong enough to break. Dozens of Yurtek vessels suddenly buckled in space, their trajectories folding violently as spatial distortion tore into them. Several collided, unable to maneuver. Some vanished in bursts of green-black flame. A larger cruiser split in half, its spinal core unraveling like threads in water. The swarm broke. Chaos erupted among the Yurtek ranks. Their perfect coordination shattered. Ships collided, others retreated. The wall collapsed. "Open us a lane," Hale growled, and the crew obeyed. The Vanguard cut through the disorganized enemy like a rusted axe through flesh. Gunfire never stopped. Not for a second. The entire bridge felt like a battlefield. No shields, just brute force. The Vanguard didn't look beautiful while it killed. It looked terrifying. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was only minutes, the last of the immediate swarm pulled back. On the tactical screen, dozens of Union vessels began pushing forward, emboldened by the destruction Hale had carved through the enemy line. Fighters launched. Cruisers rallied. Humanity's broken backbone had straightened. They'd just seen a ghost ship become a monster. The bridge was a mess. Smoke curled in the air. Blood smeared one of the side panels where a junior officer had been thrown from her seat. Medics pulled her away. Hale leaned on the rail in front of the viewplate, staring at the drifting wreckage of Yurtek ships. "We're not done," he said quietly. Knox coughed, pulling off a bloodied glove. "We just crippled 200 ships. You sure about that?" "They were testing us," Hale said. "That wasn't their real wave. That was a probe. They're gathering data, adjusting." He turned toward Rami. "Get ready for the next one." She nodded. "And what about Cassandra?" He looked down at the readout. "Cooling. Offline core integrity. 62% remaining charges. One more shot," he said. "That's all we've got." Knox raised an eyebrow. "Then what?" Hale's voice dropped to a whisper. "Then we make them bleed the old way." The air on the bridge felt thick, like it had absorbed too much tension to circulate properly. The smoke from damaged consoles clung to the walls, coiling through the vents and leaving a chemical stench behind. No one spoke for a long moment. They didn't need to. Every crew member knew what they were staring down now. The tactical display flashed again. New contacts. Hundreds more. And this time, they were organized. "Confirmed," Rami said, her voice calm despite the flickering screen. "Looks like another wave. Bigger, faster, denser formation." "How many?" Hale asked. She hesitated. "Best guess. Close to 1,000. Knox gave a low whistle. "And we've got one round left." "No," Hale said. "We've got one round, a stubborn crew, and a ship too stupid to die." Keeler, still nursing a burn on his left hand from the last overload, looked up. "Sir, incoming Union communication. Admiral Voth from the Crescent Dawn. Priority override." "Mute it." "But—" "I said mute it." Keeler tapped the console reluctantly. Hale knew exactly what the Admiral wanted to say. "Fall back. Regroup. Wait. Let the smarter ships handle it." The Union brass had never liked the Vanguard. They only tolerated it now because it was winning. That didn't mean they trusted it. Or him. Rami turned from her station. "The second wave will be on us in 3 minutes. But this one's not acting like the last. They're not swarming. They're forming rings?" Knox frowned. "Like containment rings?" "Number defensive spheres," she said, squinting at the screen. "They're protecting something." Hale walked up to the display, arms folded across his chest. His eyes tracked the pattern of ships, tight layers, rotating, shielding a core cluster. And inside that core, a single ship. Massive. Bigger than any Yurtek vessel they'd encountered. "Is that—" Keeler leaned in. Is that a flagship? No, Hale muttered. That's their queen. It had to be. The Urtek didn't have leadership like humans. They had command nodes, biomachines with tactical control over the swarm. The thing at the center wasn't just a ship. It was a brain. A floating brain the size of a Union capital city, wrapped in metal, thrumming with data so thick it glowed like lightning through its skin. That's our target, Hale said. Knox looked at him like he'd lost his mind. You want to shoot Cassandra at that? It's surrounded by 1,000 ships. And that's exactly why we need to do it. Rami gave a slow nod. If we take it out, the rest of them might fracture, lose coordination, collapse into disarray. They won't collapse, Hale said, but they'll get dumb, sloppy. They'll start fighting like animals again, and we can beat animals. Knox walked to the wall panel and punched in the override code for Cassandra. The display lit up with warnings. Final charge detected. Core stability, 58% system status, unpredictable. Recommend abort launch sequence. He looked over his shoulder. We fire this, we might crack the ship in half. We're not here to survive, Hale said. We're here to finish something Earth started. He tapped into the comms again, this time speaking directly to his crew, not the Union fleet. This is Captain Hale. We've got one shot left with Cassandra. One chance to take out the Urtek command node. We hit it, we break their hold on this sector. We miss, and we die. He let that sink in. We didn't build this ship to be fast. We didn't build it to be pretty. We built it to be angry. And if we're going down swinging. One by one, voices started replying over the ship's internal comms. Engineering ready. Gunnery ready? Medical secured. Emergency lockdown in place. Deck 7 is patched and sealed, sir. We're with you. Hale nodded. All right, let's aim for the Queen. The Vanguard began moving again, slow and defiant. Every plate on its hull was scorched. A dozen sections were sealed by emergency bulkheads. 2 turrets had been reduced to melted slag, but it kept moving. The Urtek noticed. The defensive rings began to shift, adjusting as they realized the Vanguard was pushing forward. Some of the outer ships peeled away, trying to intercept. Targeting locked, Rami said. Queen node is within the Cassandra firing path in 80 seconds. Distance? 15 clicks and closing. Too far, Hale said. We need to get closer, get inside their shell. Knox looked at him. You want to thread the ship through 1,000 enemy vessels? Hale smiled without humor. Yeah, and if they don't like it, they can try and stop us. The next 60 seconds were hell. Urtek ships dove at them from every angle. The gunners on the Vanguard were relentless, mowing down anything within range, but the enemies kept coming. Explosions rocked the ship. Damage reports poured in. Hull breach on Deck 4. Fire in Reactor Sub-Bay 3. Portside comms completely offline. Still they moved forward, closer. Then, the command came. Fire Cassandra. Everything on the ship went dark. The lights flickered once, then died completely. Even emergency power blinked out. For a full 2 seconds, the Vanguard became a tomb drifting in silence. Then, the pulse released. No sound, just gravity screaming. The space between the Vanguard and the Queen node folded in on itself. Not a beam, not a blast. A collapse of dimensional tension that burst outward in a shockwave too unnatural for even physics to understand. It tore through the Urtek defenses like paper. Dozens of ships were caught in the spatial backlash, twisting, warping, their hulls stretching and snapping like rubber bands. The Queen node's shielding flared, pulsed once, and then buckled. Its core began to crack, like an egg under pressure. Biomechanical skin peeled back, fluids vented into space like arterial spray, electrical surges flared across its outer frame. Then, it imploded. Everything went white. When the bridge lights returned, most of the crew were on the floor, thrown from their posts. Sparks fell like snow from the ceiling, but the screen showed only one thing. The Queen node was gone. And the Urtek? They were scattering. Every ship in the swarm broke formation. Some fled, others drifted. Coordination was gone. Hale's gamble had worked. The Union fleet began to surge forward, pressing the advantage. 1,000 voices across space erupted in celebration. But the Vanguard had paid the price. "Status?" Hale asked, coughing. Knox helped Rami up. She had a cut over her eyebrow, but waved him off. "Cassandra is done," she said. "Melted straight through the core housing. The main reactor is unstable. If we don't shut it down manually, we lose the ship," Knox finished grimly. Hale didn't hesitate. "Evacuate." "What?" Rami blinked. "We can still hold her together." "You have 5 minutes," Hale snapped. "Get the crew to the escape pods. That's an order." "What about you?" Keeler asked. Hale looked out at the wreckage of the Queen node. "I've got unfinished business in engineering." Rami stepped forward, voice low. "You don't need to die for this." Hale met her eyes. "We all died when Earth built Cassandra. I'm just cleaning up the mess." Alarms wailed like dying animals as Hale walked the burning halls of the Vanguard. Every step echoed with the sound of groaning metal, gas vents hissing, and electrical arcs snapping like tiny whips in the smoke-choked corridors. The ship was coming apart, not from enemy fire, but from within. The last blast from Cassandra had been too much. Power relays overloaded, the backup containment rings were blown. The main reactor, already overworked, was spiraling toward critical. And deep inside the belly of the ship, the Cassandra core, warped, cracked, bleeding radiation, was ticking like a bomb. Hale passed 2 crew members dragging a wounded technician toward the escape pods. They paused when they saw him. "Captain, are you—" "Go," he ordered, waving them off. "Get to the pods." "But sir," I said, "go." They didn't argue again. They moved. Fast. There was no time to waste. Hale continued toward engineering, coughing into the crook of his arm as the smoke thickened. His lungs burned. Sweat ran down his back despite the cold of the ship's failing climate system. Systems flickered, sparked, failed. But he kept walking. He wasn't afraid of death. Not anymore. He'd made peace with that a long time ago, back when Project Cassandra was first greenlit, before his brother had died testing its prototype, before Earth had buried the weapon and promised to never speak its name again. He had broken that promise, for victory, for survival, for humanity. The main reactor room was a furnace when he arrived. The bulkhead had partially collapsed, forcing him to crawl under twisted beams. Inside, lights strobed red. Radiation warning klaxons screamed in his ears. The massive cylindrical core at the center of the room was pulsing erratically, its heat shields groaning under the strain. And in front of it, desperately typing into a scorched control console, was Knox. Hale froze. "You're supposed to be gone," he barked. Knox didn't look up. "And let you play the hero alone? Hell no. You disobeyed a direct order." "Yep." Knox tore a melted panel from the wall and jammed a power bypass tool into the guts of the system. "Sue me later." Hale stormed over, furious. "You'll die down here." Knox grinned through gritted teeth. "So will you. This way we can at least argue about it all the way to hell." Despite everything, Hale cracked a small smile. "What's the plan?" he asked, kneeling beside him. "The core's on Cascade," Knox explained quickly. "Can't shut it down, but I can eject it." "Eject it?" Hale blinked. "Into open space?" "Exactly. We dump the entire thing. Cassandra's melted into the main reactor, but if I can override the mag clamps and decouple the feed lines, we can jettison the whole core chamber out the side launch bay." Hale nodded slowly. "The blast won't kill us?" Knox looked at him. "Well, it might." Hale grunted. So, the usual. The two men worked side by side, prying open manual control boxes and overriding digital safeties that were already fried. Hale's hands were shaking, either from radiation exposure or the sheer strain of the last few hours. He wasn't sure. Every few seconds, the ship lurched again as its systems protested their own destruction. "You ever regret it?" Knox asked suddenly. Hale didn't look up. "What?" "Coming out here, commanding the ship, trusting Cassandra." Hale paused, staring at the console. A faint red light blinked at him, warning that they had less than 7 minutes before thermal overload. "I regret it every day," he said finally, "but I'd do it again." Knox nodded. "Me too." Suddenly, the core gave a deep, rattling groan. The inner casings began to spin out of sync. Heat surged. "We're out of time," Knox snapped. "Then cut the clamps." Hale yanked a lever hard enough to dislocate something in his shoulder. He didn't care. Alarms doubled in volume. A huge crash echoed as the magnetic seals around the core deactivated, one by one. Knox slammed his fist into a manual eject switch, forcing it to move. Metal screamed. The deck shook violently. Then, with a sound like a deep exhale, the core detached. There was a moment of silence, and then a violent jolt as the launch bay behind the core fired the chamber out into space, one final burial for the weapon they should never have unleashed. The core floated for a second, glowing like a dying star. Then it detonated. From the bridge and across the fleet, they would later describe it as a second sunrise, a silent, blinding ball of white-blue fire that lit up the wreckage of the battlefield. Every ship turned their sensors to the explosion, certain the Vanguard had gone with it. But when the light faded, the Vanguard was still there. Crippled, scarred, half dead, but alive. Barely. Inside engineering, Hale and Knox were thrown against a wall by the shockwave. A pipe burst above them, pouring coolant onto the deck. Flames danced across the floor. The heat was unbearable. "Now that was a send-off," Knox muttered, coughing blood into his hand. Hale looked up, seeing only flickering lights and smoke. "Status?" he croaked. Knox glanced at the one working screen. "We're stable. No chain reaction. Core's gone. Ship's crippled. But she's still breathing." Hale sagged against the wall, laughter bubbling up despite the pain in his ribs. "We did it," he whispered. A soft buzz came from his earpiece, somehow still functioning. "Ain, repeat, Vanguard. This is Admiral Voth of the Crescent Dawn. Come in. Is anyone alive aboard that ship?" Hale tapped the comm. "This is Captain Hale," he rasped. "Still here, barely." "Good God," came Voth's voice, half awe, half disbelief. "We saw the blast. Thought you were gone. We're moving to retrieve survivors now." "Copy that," Hale said. "But bring medical. A lot of medical." There was a long pause on the line. "You destroyed their queen node," Voth said finally. "The swarm's in full retreat. The tide just turned because of you." Hale looked around the ruined engineering deck. The body count, the blood, the scars on the walls. "No," he said quietly. "It turned because of them. The crew. All I did was point the ship in the right direction." The comms clicked off. The signal was weak, but enough to confirm rescue ships were en route. Knox slumped beside him. "So, what now?" Hale closed his eyes, listening to the silence. The ship was quiet now, wounded, resting. "Now we let the Union take the credit," he muttered. "They'll rebuild, hand out medals, rewrite history. And us? We disappear. Fade back into myth." Knox nodded slowly. "Just the way you like it." Above them, emergency power flickered to life. Barely. Enough to power life support. The Vanguard, the ship they all mocked, the slow relic, the cursed machine, had become a symbol. Not of perfection, but of persistence, of raw, angry survival. Marcus Hale sat back against the wall and waited for the medics to come. He didn't know what would happen next, if they'd rebuild the ship or bury it. But he knew one thing. The galaxy would never laugh at Earth again. Not after this. Not after her. 3 days later, Marcus Hale awoke in a sterile med bay aboard the Crescent Dawn. White lights, cold sheets, the faint hiss of oxygen systems, and the occasional chirp of a monitoring device filled the room. It was all too clean, too pristine. Nothing like the familiar chaos and grime of the Vanguard. His left arm was bound in a regeneration sleeve. His ribs were taped. There was dried blood in his beard. His whole body ached like it had been chewed up and spit out by a star. But he was alive. Barely. The door opened with a soft chime. A figure stepped inside, tall, elegant in her uniform, and carrying a datapad like a sword. Admiral Voth. She stopped at the foot of his bed, arms crossed. "You look like hell," she said, though her voice carried more respect than mockery. Hale coughed. "You should see the other guy." Voth didn't smile, but something in her face twitched, like she wanted to. "We retrieved 97 survivors from the Vanguard, 54 wounded, some critical. Your XO, Rami, is in recovery. She kept your bridge from collapsing after you left." "Of course she did," Hale said softly. "She's better than I ever was." Voth sat in the chair beside him and held out the datapad. "We're compiling a report. The Council wants details. Weapon analysis, strategy logs, chain of command protocols. I'm supposed to extract a full debrief from you." Hale didn't take the pad. "I'm sure you'll make it sound clean," he said. "Heroic, polished enough to read at a banquet." "You're not wrong," Voth replied. "They're already calling you the Ghost Admiral of Vega Prime. Someone leaked a shot of your ship coming out of the Queen Node explosion. There are posters now." "Songs. Great," Hale muttered. "Just what I always wanted. Fame." She leaned forward, her voice tightening. "But underneath the headlines, they're scared, Marcus." He looked at her. Really looked. The stern face. The tired eyes. This wasn't a woman basking in victory. This was someone calculating risk and understanding that a line had been crossed. "Cassandra was never approved," she continued. "It was banned for a reason. You revived it, deployed it, and weaponized it against a species no one has ever fully understood. That terrifies them." "Good," Hale said. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "They should be terrified," he said, voice steady now. "We begged for help when Earth was struggling. We asked for scraps. No one answered, so we built our own monster. They laughed when we sent the Vanguard, called her a coffin with engines." He leaned closer, eyes hard. "But that coffin just carved open the heart of a swarm the Union couldn't slow down in 100 battles. So yeah, they should be scared. Of what humanity can do when we stop asking for permission." Voth said nothing for a long time. Then she stood. "You're being transferred back to Earth. High Command wants you debriefed personally, and probably buried, figuratively. Or maybe not." Hale raised an eyebrow. "I thought I was the hero of Vega Prime." "You were," she said, "but heroes are dangerous when they don't play by the rules." He watched her go, the soft swish of the door sealing her exit. Heroes are dangerous. He already knew that. That's why he'd kept Cassandra hidden all those years. That's why he'd taken the Vanguard in the first place. Not because it was the best ship, but because it was the only one they'd let him disappear inside. And now, they wanted to make him disappear again. 2 days later, he was escorted to a secure transport shuttle by 2 quiet Union officers. No conversation, no fanfare. Just cold metal halls, a tight-lipped pilot, and a seat by a sealed window. As they approached Earth, the planet didn't look like home. It looked vulnerable. Even after everything, Hale couldn't see the blue oceans or green continents. All he saw were targets. All he felt was unfinished work. The moment the shuttle touched down, he was taken underground, deep beneath the Earth Defense Coalition's Strategic Command Facility in Geneva. Sterile hallways, white tiles, armed guards. They led him into a circular chamber where a council of 12 waited behind a curved desk. No names, no introductions, just questions. For hours. They wanted to know everything. How he'd accessed Cassandra, who helped him build it, why he'd taken the risk, whether he understood the diplomatic consequences of his actions. They hinted that he might face trial for unauthorized use of banned weapons, endangering the fleet, even potential war crimes. Hale answered them all the same way. I did what you were too afraid to do, and we're still here because of it. Some of the council members looked uneasy. One stared at him with hatred. Another, an older man with a long scar down his neck, just nodded faintly, as if silently agreeing. Finally, they dismissed him. He was escorted to a holding room and left in silence. Hours passed, maybe days, until the door opened again. This time it wasn't guards. It was Rami. Her face was still bruised, one arm in a sling, but her posture was unbroken, and her eyes burned with quiet fire. They're not going to charge you, she said. Hale raised an eyebrow. That surprising? They wanted to, she said, but they can't afford the backlash. You're a hero now. Too many people watched the feed. They saw what you did. The Vanguard has a cult following. Wonderful, he muttered. Soon they'll start naming coffee brands after us. Rami stepped closer. They're grounding you. He blinked. What? They're retiring the Vanguard, scrapping what's left. They don't want another Cassandra, and they don't want you commanding another ship. Hale said nothing for a long moment. Then, finally, good. Let them be afraid. Rami studied him. So that's it? He shook his head slowly. Not even close. Outside the facility, the media had already begun speculating about Hale's fate. Rumors swirled. Was he imprisoned, executed, exiled? But Marcus Hale wasn't any of those things. He disappeared. Officially, he resigned. Quietly. Peacefully. The Union released a statement thanking him for his service under extraordinary circumstances, and issued a commemorative medal they never expected him to pick up. But off the record, he went dark. Rumors claimed he was working with fringe Earth military units, that he was helping design new Black Ops ships, that he was quietly building a second Cassandra, one even the Union wouldn't know about until it was too late. They never confirmed any of it. But they watched. Every signal, every whisper, and in the distant colonies, when people spoke of legends, they told the story of the Vanguard, the slow ship, the forgotten crew, the man who carried a forbidden weapon into the jaws of hell and came out alive. They never told it clean. They told it the way it was meant to be remembered. A ghost ship, a nightmare, a warning, and in the void beyond the stars, where new empires stirred and old enemies plotted, those who once laughed at Earth now listened carefully when the name Marcus Hale was spoken. Because in the end, they learned the truth the hard way. Humanity doesn't win by playing fair. Humanity wins by surviving. The shipyard on Proxima B5 wasn't on any official registry. Buried in a dead zone between surveyed sectors, it didn't show up on star maps, and no beacon marked its orbit. It was a skeleton of old technology and fresh ambition. Raw scaffolding, unregistered transports, and engineers too smart and too exiled for Union employment. It was exactly the kind of place Marcus Hale liked. He stood at the edge of a gantry, arms folded, staring at the colossal frame being assembled below. Welders moved like ants across the black hull, sparks dancing into the artificial gravity field and fizzling out mid-air. Giant ribs of reinforced alloy stretched into the void, slowly forming the bones of something that, if successful, wouldn't just replace the Vanguard. It would outmatch it. Behind him, a soft set of footsteps approached. Rami. She'd cut her hair since Geneva. Looked sharper now, like she had shed her uniform along with her patience for protocol. "You're really doing it," she said, stepping up beside him. "Building a new one." Hale didn't look at her. "Not a new Vanguard. That ship was built on desperation. This one's built on intent." Rami raised an eyebrow. "They'll find out, eventually." "Let them," Hale said. "I'm not hiding this time." She studied the frame. "It's bigger. 30%. "Slower," he smirked. "Twice as fast." She gave a low whistle. "What about the weapon?" Hale's smile faded. "It's not Cassandra." "Good," she said quickly. "That thing, it's worse," he finished. Rami went quiet. After the Vanguard, the galaxy had entered a cold hush. The Yurtek retreat had held, for now. But even scattered, their presence could still be felt along the edges of civilized space. They weren't finished. Just confused, cut off from their hive logic. Animalistic now, yes, but not harmless. And the Union, in typical fashion, declared victory and moved on. It left a bitter taste in Hale's mouth. "They think they've won," he said, as the hull below lit up with fusion welds. "They think the war's over because the enemy stopped marching in straight lines." Rami shook her head. "You sound like a man who wants the war to come back." "I don't," Hale said. "But I've lived long enough to know it always does." She didn't argue. She knew it too. After a pause, she asked, "What's the name?" Hale looked down at the ship. Still skeletal, still silent, but already coiled with the same slow-burning rage that made the Vanguard legendary. "The Gravedigger," he said. Rami's eyes narrowed. "Subtle." "It's not meant to be subtle." He turned to her. "I'm not building another shield. I'm building a blade, one that cuts before they even realize they're bleeding." Rami crossed her arms. "And the Union?" "They'll come looking," Hale admitted. "Eventually. But by the time they realize what we're making here, they'll need us again." She hesitated. Then, "You know I'm with you, right?" "Not because of the weapon. Not even because of the war." "Then why?" Hale asked. "Because when the universe calls us monsters," she said, "you're the only one who never flinches." Hale didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both looked out again as the frame of the Gravedigger groaned, the first signs of its central power spine going live. A ripple of blue energy passed through its ribs. This was not a defensive vessel. This was a message. Elsewhere, far beyond Union jurisdiction, a pirate broadcast flickered into life. It didn't come through standard channels. It was piggybacked on obsolete military frequencies, bouncing between defunct relay satellites and buried transponders no one had used in decades. The signal was raw, grainy. Just a voice, recorded over low static. It said, "They buried the ship that saved the Union. They silenced the crew who stared into the black and didn't blink. But we haven't forgotten. When the next swarm comes, when the stars bleed again, we won't wait for orders. We'll wait for the ghost. Because Hale isn't gone. He's sharpening the knife. It ran for less than 30 seconds, and it was enough to set off a dozen flags across Union intelligence. They traced the source. They couldn't find it. They questioned Hale's former crew. Most had vanished. Some were off-grid. Others had assumed new names in outer colonies. No one cooperated. Even the ones under surveillance kept quiet. Something was happening in the dark. On a mining station near the Thalan Expanse, a group of mercenaries sat around a comms panel, replaying the broadcast over and over. "You think it's real?" one asked, his voice low, unsure. An older man at the corner table didn't answer right away. He was missing 2 fingers and wore an old flight jacket with a faded Vanguard insignia stitched above the heart. He sipped from a tin cup. "If it is," he said finally, "you'll want to be on the right side of it." The others fell silent. The legend was growing again. Not from propaganda, not from union news cycles, from whispers, from the people who remembered what it felt like to lose, and then saw what happened when a slow, dying ship refused to play by the rules and won. Back at Proxima B5, the Gravedigger's inner chambers were being sealed. Unlike the Vanguard, it didn't have an AI, but it didn't need one. Its systems were semi-analog, ghosted with quantum redundancy, able to vanish off most sensors by shifting its signal to mimic background radiation. It had hull plating that bent light, not perfectly, not invisibly, but enough to make it hard to find and harder to follow. Its weapon system, codenamed Threnody, was still under wraps. Even most of Hale's engineers didn't know what it was. But they knew what it wasn't. It wasn't a shield. It wasn't a gun. It was a consequence. Rami stood at the new bridge, staring at the blank console. It wasn't activated yet. Not fully. She ran her hand along the cold steel. Not touchscreen, not voice responsive, just hard buttons. Switches. A machine made for humans, not algorithms. She smiled. "We're going to scare the hell out of them," she whispered. Behind her, Marcus Hale stepped into the room. He looked older now. Not broken. Tempered. Like a blade left too long in the forge. "How long until she's ready?" he asked. Rami checked the schedule. 2 months for structural completion. Another 6 to wire the command relays and test the core. Hale nodded. "And the crew? Already volunteering, veterans, exiles, even some aliens." He raised an eyebrow. "Aliens? Apparently some of them respect what we did. Fear it, too." "Good," Hale said. "Fear keeps the cowards out of the way." He stepped forward, placed a hand on the command chair. "I won't make the same mistakes this time," he said quietly. "Neither will I," Rami replied. They stood in silence for a long moment, listening to the construction below. The Gravedigger was coming together, not fast, not clean, but steady, relentless. Like the men and women who would fly her, like the war they knew hadn't truly ended. Space was never silent, not really. It had its own language, heard only by those who learned to listen. The ping of deep sensors, the thrum of pulse engines, the static noise of cosmic radiation. And out near the edge of the scutum sector, beyond any sanctioned chart or convoy lane, the dark began to speak again. The Urtek weren't gone. They had been wounded. Yes, stunned, confused, fractured, but not broken. Without the Queen Node, they had devolved into a hive without guidance, hundreds of scattered warforms drifting across forgotten sectors. Some starved, some fought each other, some simply shut down, dormant and waiting. But one cluster, one, had endured. It wasn't large, only 17 ships, all scarred and warped from gravitational damage inflicted by the Vanguard. But they hadn't decayed. They had changed. They had adapted. In the heart of a dead moon orbiting a collapsed binary, the remaining Urtek swarm had fused itself into something new. Metal folded into bone. Memory into instinct. And in the hollowed-out caverns of the moon, they built a new command unit. Not a Queen Node, but something older, purer, a warden. No exposed brain matter, no reliance on hyperlinked command logic. The warden didn't coordinate, it directed. A lone intelligence, hardwired to one purpose: identify the threat, hunt the threat, erase the threat, and the threat had a name. Marcus Hale. On Proxima B5, the gravedigger was nearly complete. The hull was sealed. Power ran through her frame like veins through muscle. Fusion lines glowed a deep crimson, steady and hot. Unlike the Vanguard, she wasn't born of salvaged parts. Every inch was deliberate, every system designed with only one thing in mind: survival at any cost. Her weapon, Threnody, remained locked. Only Hale and one engineer, a mute specialist from Ceres named Gavax, knew its details. The crew speculated endlessly. Some said it was a miniaturized Cassandra. Others whispered about antimatter lances, or a subspace virus that killed enemy ships by unraveling their computation fields. Rami knew better than to ask. If it was dangerous enough for Hale to keep it secret, it was dangerous enough to work. "Dock seals are holding," she reported. "Reactor 3 has finished testing, and we've got our full crew complement, 112 souls, including 8 from former Union Black Ops." Hale stood at the new bridge, gazing at the main viewport. The stars looked sharper now, almost hostile. Not because they'd changed, but because he had. "Time to fly," he said. The gravedigger undocked with a low vibration that passed through the hull like a whisper. No cheering, no countdown, just silence and a mission. They drifted out into open space, engine trails minimal, signatures masked. No Federation beacons, no identity pings. Ghost ship again. But this time, they weren't limping into war. They were hunting. Days passed. The gravedigger ghosted its way across deep sectors. Hale had a path, one built from sensor anomalies, faint radiation echoes, and intercepted fragments of ancient Urtech code. It was like chasing the shadow of a monster that no longer bled, but still left footprints in the sand. And then they found it. A single planet, lifeless, orbiting 2 failed stars. No heat, no vegetation, but sensor readings were wrong. Gravity fluctuated near the surface, magnetic fields twisted like a knot. Deep beneath the crust, something pulsed. The Warden. "Prepare Threnody," Hale ordered. Rami gave him a look. "You're sure?" "If we wait," he said, "we lose our edge. We hit it before it becomes another queen." Knox, who had rejoined the crew under a different name, ran a hand over his shaven head. "This isn't like Vega Prime. That was a swarm. This feels like something worse." Hale looked at them all. "Then we bury it before it hatches." The gravedigger descended into orbit, silent and unseen. Threnodi's targeting core was activated. And for the first time since its construction, the crew saw what it really was. Not a beam, not a cannon. It was a dimensional inversion lattice, a weapon that collapsed possibility into reality. Where Cassandra had erased matter by destabilizing gravity, Threnody reached into adjacent timelines and imported entropy. In simpler terms, it killed things by forcing them to suffer every death they could possibly have at once. It didn't just break ships, it unwrote futures. "Target locked," Gavax signed silently at Hale. Rami gave one final nod. "You're the captain," Hale whispered. "Fire." Threnody released nothing. There was no sound, no glow, not even a tremor. But deep on the dead planet, the caverns where the Warden pulsed, where 17 hybrid Urtech ships lay fused together, began to shake. Metal screamed. The AI howled. Every possible malfunction, every flaw, every theoretical vulnerability hit at once. Circuits cooked, code degraded, control systems ran simultaneous paradox loops. And in one final, impossible moment, the Warden became nothing. Not debris, not wreckage, just absence. On the Gravedigger's bridge, the crew stared at the tactical screen. No explosion, no shrapnel, just silence. "It's gone," Rami breathed. "No," Hale corrected. "It never was." But they were too late. The warden had sent a signal. Not a call for help, but a final broadcast, and every scattered Yurtek node heard it. Across the void, ships once dormant stirred, not awakened, but provoked, not intelligent, but enraged. And they came, thousands of them, old vessels, broken ones, spiked, melted, fused, ships that had wandered for decades, reassembled by instinct and rage, powered by raw nuclear hearts, and dripping with synthetic flesh. The swarm didn't speak. It screamed, and it came straight for the gravedigger. The battle wasn't elegant. The crew of the gravedigger didn't have backup. No Union fleet, no allies, just one ship, a dozen guns, and an untested monster in its belly. They fought like humans always did, dirty, fast, and willing to burn everything to win. Coil guns tore holes in Yurtek armor, defense grids lit up like fireworks, hull plating melted, fire spilled into the crew quarters, systems overloaded. One by one, the gravedigger's outer decks began to die, but the core held, and Threnody, though drained, had one charge left. Hale stared at the incoming swarm, closer now, almost surrounding them. He turned to Rami. "Do it." "No precision targeting," she warned. "You'll catch us in the collapse." "I know." He turned to the crew, many of them bloodied, some missing limbs, all still standing. "Thank you," he said. Then he gripped the override lever and pulled. The last charge of Threnody detonated at point-blank range. Every Yurtek ship within 10 kilometers ceased. No explosion, no fire, just a wave of sheer impossibility. Where 1,000 screaming vessels had once surged, there was now quiet. They found the gravedigger floating 3 weeks later. Drifting. Powerless. Lifeless. The rescue crew from a distant trading convoy found 42 survivors in sealed compartments. The rest were gone, either killed or taken by Threnady's collapse. Among the missing, Marcus Hale. No body, no signal, just his last recorded log. If you're reading this, then I failed to die properly, which means you now have a choice. Tell the Union to rebuild its fleet of parade ships, or tell them to start making monsters again, because the galaxy doesn't respect ceremony. It respects consequence. The recording cut off. And in the years that followed, legends filled the vacuum. Stories of a ship called the Gravedigger, seen drifting near battlefields just before the enemy collapsed. Whispers of a captain with a dead stare and a voice like rust, who asked no questions and offered no mercy. Some said it was ghost tech. Others believed it was Hale, somehow surviving, somehow still hunting. But every fleet, every admiral, every soldier who knew fear in the dark, all said the same thing when they told the story. Never underestimate a human warship, especially the slow ones, because they don't come to fight. They come to end things. Forever. The stars shimmered against the black void, unbothered by the chaos about to unfold. The Galactic Dominion's fleet floated in perfect formation, their massive warships gleaming with the cold efficiency of an empire that had ruled for millennia. From the bridge of the Dominion's flagship, Vorthon's Wrath, Admiral Zurl stood tall, his scaled hands clasped behind his back as he watched the holographic display before him. A red blinking dot had just entered the system. The humans had arrived. Zurl bared his fangs in amusement. He had heard the stories. All Dominion officers had. The humans were troublemakers, defiant beyond reason, a primitive species that had no business standing against the might of the galaxy's most dominant civilization. Yet somehow, they had become a thorn in the Dominion's side. Their ships were crude, their numbers insignificant, and their technology laughably outdated compared to the Dominion's might. And yet, they fought with an aggression no other species dared to display, They did not break when outnumbered. They did not surrender when surrounded. Even when their planets burned, they would strike back with reckless fury, as if war was embedded in their very souls. The Dominion had crushed dozens of rebellions over the centuries, wiping entire species from existence when necessary. But no enemy had ever frustrated them like humanity. No species had ever fought like they did. That was why Zurl had been sent here, to end this war once and for all. He studied the display with cold calculation, noting the single red dot moving toward his fleet. Just one ship. One. Pathetic. "This is a joke," sneered Vice Admiral Zinth, his voice thick with contempt. "Do the humans take us for fools? A single warship against the might of the Dominion." Zurl did not respond immediately. Something didn't sit right. He enlarged the image on the display, zooming in on the approaching vessel. It was odd. The ship was massive, easily larger than any known human warship. Its dark hull was covered in what appeared to be thick, layered armor, its surface marked with scars of past battles. The design was crude, industrial, almost barbaric. Zurl's gut tightened. "Scan the vessel," he ordered. "Already on it," replied a Dominion officer. "Analyzing now." Moments passed. The bridge remained silent, save for the beeping of consoles and the steady hum of the ship's power systems. Then the officer's voice faltered. This isn't possible." Zurl turned, his slitted eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" "The ship. It has no energy signature." "What?" Zinth snapped. "That's absurd. Every warship has a power core. What are they running on, sheer audacity?" "It gets worse," the officer continued. His scaled hands trembled as he manipulated the display, revealing layer after layer of the ship's structure. "Sir, the armor, it's reinforced with some kind of exotic metal, far denser than anything we've ever encountered. We've detected weapon systems all over the hull, but what?" Zurl demanded. The officer swallowed. "There are no energy-based weapons. It's all kinetic." A hush fell over the bridge. Kinetic weapons. Primitive, outdated, useless against modern energy shields. Dominion fleets had long abandoned such crude methods, relying instead on particle cannons and plasma arrays that rendered traditional projectiles obsolete. And yet, the humans were bringing a warship covered in outdated guns and thick, ugly armor. What kind of insanity was this? Zinth laughed, shaking his head. "So that's their plan? Throw rocks at us and hope we break?" Zurl wasn't so sure. His instincts screamed at him. This was no ordinary ship. The humans were reckless, yes, but they weren't fools. If they had sent only one ship, it was because they believed it was enough, and that terrified him. A sudden transmission interrupted his thoughts. A voice crackled through the bridge's speakers, deep, mechanical, and dripping with menace. "This is the UNSC Hell's Reckoning. You have committed crimes against humanity. You will now face the consequences." Then, before anyone could react, the ship did something no one expected. It fired first. The Dominion fleet barely had time to react. A deafening thoom echoed through the void as Hell's Reckoning unleashed its payload. Unlike Dominion energy weapons, which fired in clean, precise bursts, the human warship's weapons roared like ancient gods of war. Massive slugs, each the size of a small ship, erupted from the ship's reinforced barrels at impossible speeds. The Dominion flagship, Vorthon's Wrath, took the first hit. The kinetic round slammed into its energy shield, and for a moment, Zurl felt the familiar satisfaction of watching primitive weapons fail against Dominion superiority. Then, to his horror, the shield flickered and shattered. Not weakened, not disrupted, it was obliterated in a single impact. A second later, the slug tore through Vorthon's Wrath like a god's fist punching through paper. The ship didn't explode in a brilliant ball of energy like it should have. It simply broke. The massive warship, a symbol of Dominion power, crumpled in on itself, pieces of metal and bodies flung into the void as the human projectile exited through the other side, still moving as if it had barely slowed down. Panic erupted on the bridge. "Shields down! Direct hit to the hull! We're venting atmosphere! Autumn, the Admiral! Admiral Zerl is down!" Zerl barely registered the pain. His chest felt heavy, something warm and wet pooling beneath him. He had been thrown against the control panel, his vision blurred, his bones aching from the impact. He gasped for air, trying to make sense of what had just happened. A single shot had torn apart the Dominion's most powerful warship. Impossible. More gunfire erupted from the human vessel. The other Dominion ships scrambled to react, but they were too slow. Hell's Reckoning wasn't fighting like them. It wasn't engaging in long-range tactical exchanges or dancing between energy blasts. It was a predator. It was hunting. Another round fired. Another ship was torn apart. The Dominion fleet began returning fire, but their energy blasts did nothing. Plasma erupted against the human ship's thick armor, but the metal plating barely scorched. The Dominion had perfected energy weapons, but Hell's Reckoning was built to withstand something much worse. The humans had designed their ship for one thing: war. Real war. Not the clean, efficient, strategic kind the Dominion had mastered, but the brutal, merciless kind. The kind where the only thing that mattered was surviving long enough to kill your enemy first. Zerl coughed, forcing himself to stand as the ship around him burned. His officers were screaming for orders, but he barely heard them. His eyes remained locked on the human warship. They had underestimated humanity. Again. And now they would pay the price. "Incoming transmission from the human vessel," one of his officers shouted. The speakers crackled. The same deep, mechanical voice from before rumbled through the bridge, thick with contempt. "You wanted a war. Now you have one." Then Hell's Reckoning fired again. The Dominion fleet was in full retreat. What had started as a show of force, an overwhelming display of the Dominion's military might, had turned into a slaughter. Hell's Reckoning moved through the battlefield like a predator, hunting its prey with terrifying precision. Its guns never stopped firing. Each kinetic slug ripped through warships as if they were made of paper, bypassing energy shields entirely and obliterating hulls in a single devastating impact. Admiral Zyril clutched his side, his uniform stained with blood as he leaned against the shattered control panel. Around him, his bridge officers were either dead or frantically trying to regain control of the crumbling Vorthon's wrath. The Dominion had never faced anything like this. Never in 1,000 years had they encountered an enemy that refused to fight on their terms. And that was why the humans were winning. "Sir!" a surviving officer shouted, barely managing to stay upright as the ship trembled from another impact. "The fleet is breaking apart. Orders?" Zerl swallowed the bile rising in his throat. He could see it now. Ships fleeing in every direction, abandoning formation, desperately trying to escape the death machine that had come for them. Escape. The word made his blood run cold. The Dominion did not run. The Dominion did not retreat. To flee from battle was an insult to their ancestors, a disgrace that would stain their legacy for generations. And yet, for the first time in his life, Zerl saw no other choice. But even as his mind screamed for survival, his pride refused to let him say the words. "This is madness," Vice Admiral Zinth hissed beside him, his usual arrogance replaced by barely contained panic. "That thing, it's not a warship. It's a monster." Zyril didn't respond. His gaze was fixed on Hell's Reckoning, watching as it casually wiped out another Dominion cruiser with a well-placed shot. The ship's design was an insult to everything the Dominion stood for. It was ugly, brutal, inefficient by their standards. Nothing but thick armor, oversized guns, and outdated technology. And yet, it was unstoppable. "Sir, we have incoming Dominion reinforcements on long-range scanners," the officer reported. "The 2nd and 3rd fleets are en route. ETA, 15 minutes. 15 minutes. Zyrl's heart pounded in his chest. If they could hold out, if they could last long enough for reinforcements to arrive, they might be able to overwhelm the human ship with sheer numbers. The Dominion still controlled this sector. This was still their war to win. And yet, deep down, Zyrl wasn't sure if even the full might of the Dominion would be enough. Then, to his horror, Hell's Reckoning began moving toward the center of the fleet. It wasn't satisfied with picking them off one by one anymore. It was going to finish them all at once. "Sir, incoming transmission," the officer said, his voice barely above a whisper. The speakers crackled once more, and the deep, unshaken voice of the human commander came through. "Run." A single word. A command. A warning. Zyrl clenched his fists, his body trembling with rage and something he had never felt before. Fear. He had always believed in the Dominion's superiority, in their unbreakable power. He had been raised to see humans as nothing more than pests. Rebellious, short-lived, inferior in every way. But standing here, watching Hell's Reckoning carve through his fleet like a god of death, he finally understood the truth. The humans weren't weak. They were the deadliest species the galaxy had ever known. And they had just declared war. Zyrl's blood ran cold. His claws dug into the metal console as the Dominion fleet shattered around him. Ships burned. Lifeboats launched in desperation. The once mighty Dominion armada, invincible for centuries, was now a graveyard of twisted metal and floating corpses. And still, Hell's Reckoning advanced. The human warship barely slowed as it plowed through the remains of its victims, its dark, scarred hull illuminated only by the flickering flames of dying Dominion vessels. It wasn't a ship. It was an executioner, a thing built for the sole purpose of destruction. Vice Admiral Zinth, his face now contorted in terror, grabbed Zyrl's arm. "We must leave, now," he shouted, his voice cracking. Zyrl wrenched his arm away, glaring at his second-in-command. "We do not run!" Zinth's eyes were wild with fear. "They gave us a chance, Admiral. They told us to run. They don't even see us as a threat anymore." That hit harder than any kinetic slug. Zyrl turned back to the tactical display. He watched in horror as the human ship charged its main gun again. Dominion warships scrambled, engines flaring in desperate attempts to evade. It was futile. The cannon roared. A glowing white-hot slug tore through the void. A battlecruiser, one of their finest, was erased in an instant, broken apart into a cloud of burning debris. No shields, no defense, no survivors. The bridge shook violently as a shockwave from a nearby explosion rocked Vorthan's wrath. Consoles sparked. The crew screamed. "Damage report," Zyrl barked. "Critical systems failing," an officer choked out. "Weapons offline. Engines at 20%. Shields are gone." Zyrl felt a horrible realization settle over him. They had lost. Not just this battle. Not just this fleet. Everything. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for centuries with cold, ruthless efficiency. They had crushed rebellions, annihilated species who defied their will, and enforced absolute control. But now, they had encountered something they could not crush. Humans were not rebels. They were predators. And they had finally decided to hunt. A new transmission crackled through the ruined bridge. The human commander's voice, deep and calm, sent a chill down Zyrl's spine. "Your reinforcements will not arrive in time." Zyrl's eyes widened. They knew about the 2nd and 3rd fleets, and they didn't care. "This is your last warning," the human voice continued. "Withdraw from this sector. Surrender your holdings, or we will come for you, one world at a time. The message ended. Silence filled the bridge. Then, in the distance, Hell's Reckoning adjusted its course, not toward them, not toward the survivors. It was leaving. Zyril exhaled shakily. He could scarcely believe it. The warship could have destroyed them all, but instead it left them floating in their own wreckage, their defeat absolute. A show of mercy. Number A message. The Dominion wasn't fighting a rebellion anymore. They were fighting extinction. The silence on the bridge was deafening. No one spoke. No one moved. The Dominion fleet, what was left of it, drifted in the void, surrounded by the wreckage of what had once been an unshakable military force. Zyril stood frozen, his claws still gripping the shattered console. His mind refused to accept what had just happened. This wasn't how battles were supposed to go. The Dominion did not lose. The Dominion did not run. And yet, here he was, standing on the bridge of a crippled flagship, watching Hell's Reckoning vanish into the abyss like a shadow. The humans had won. The weight of that truth crushed him. Zinth finally broke the silence, his voice hoarse. "Admiral, your orders?" Zyril turned to face him. Zinth's scales had paled, his hands trembling at his sides. He was waiting for the Admiral to command them, to tell them what to do next. But what was left to say? Zyril swallowed the bitter taste of defeat. "Send the retreat signal." A ripple of shock passed through the remaining officers. Even in this dire moment, the idea of retreat was almost unthinkable. And yet no one argued. They had seen what he had seen. They had felt it. Zinth's voice wavered. "Sir, the High Command—" "I know what High Command will say," Zyril snapped. "But if we stay, we die." No one could deny that truth. Zinth hesitated only a moment longer before turning to the comms officer. "Send the signal." A soft chime echoed through the remains of the Dominion fleet. One by one, the surviving ships turned and limped toward the nearest hyperlane. Some moved quickly, their pilots desperate to escape before Hell's Reckoning changed its mind. Others struggled, their hulls barely holding together, their engines flickering with failing power. The once mighty Dominion fleet, proud and unstoppable, had been reduced to survivors. As Vorthon's wrath engaged its jump drive, Zyril took one last look at the battlefield. The wreckage of his fleet floated like gravestones, an eternal reminder of what had happened here today. The Dominion had thought themselves gods. The humans had proved them wrong. The War Council chamber was silent. Admiral Zyril stood in the center of the vast circular room, his hands clenched behind his back, his posture rigid as the High Lords of the Dominion glared down at him. They sat atop their elevated thrones, their expressions a mix of disbelief, rage, and, beneath it all, fear. "You are telling us," High Lord Varric hissed, his mandibles clicking with barely contained fury, "that a single human warship annihilated an entire Dominion fleet?" Zyril's jaw tightened. "Yes, my lord." Another High Lord scoffed. "Impossible." "You were outmaneuvered by primitives?" Another sneered. Zyril did not react. He had expected this. The High Lords had never faced true war. Their rule had been absolute for generations, their conquests effortless. They had grown soft, believing themselves invincible. They had never faced Hell's Reckoning. He spoke carefully. "The humans are not primitive. Their technology is unconventional, brutal, but effective. They do not fight by our rules. They do not need to." Varric leaned forward, his eyes burning. "And you retreated?" Zyril met his gaze without flinching. "If we had stayed, we would have been exterminated." A cold silence fell over the chamber. Even the most arrogant among them could not ignore that word. Extermination. It had always been their threat, their weapon. But now, the humans wielded it against them. Varric exhaled sharply, his claws tapping against the armrest of his throne. And this warship, what did they call it? Zerl's throat felt dry. He could still hear the human commander's voice, calm and merciless. This is the UNSC Hell's Reckoning. He looked up. They called it a warning. Deep in the heart of human-controlled space, within a classified military outpost, the commander of Hell's Reckoning stood before a holographic display. The Dominion retreat had been confirmed. Their fleet was shattered. Their fear was real. The mission had been a success. A young officer approached, hesitant. "Sir, what now?" The commander's expression was unreadable as he studied the galactic map. The Dominion had ruled unchecked for centuries, their tyranny spreading across the stars. But now, for the first time, they knew what it felt like to be hunted. He exhaled. "Now?" His voice was quiet. Cold. "Now, we make them afraid."